Hi, my name is Annika Bartels, and I will be discussing my action research project. For my topic, I chose to focus on English language learners in the classroom, and there are a couple reasons why I chose this topic. First, both my father and my husband are immigrants to Canada, and English is not their first language. My dad immigrated to Canada from the Netherlands when he was only 5 years old, and my husband immigrated to Canada in December of 2015. For the duration of my entire relationship with my husband, almost 10 years now, I've been helping him improve his English competencies. I've personally seen the struggle and the frustration that comes with learning the English language, allowing me to see ELLs differently. I understand how frustrating learning English can be, as it is not an easy language to learn. I've also experienced moving to another country where I did not know more than a few words in their language. When I was 18 years old, I moved to the Netherlands for a year, and I experienced the struggle of living in a new country with a different culture and language. I know the strategies that other people use that help me understand something, and I also understand how significant it is to feel welcomed and the importance of not being laughed at for my grammar or pronunciation mistakes, for this often inhibited me from trying to speak aloud. Having several ELL students in your classroom is the reality for teachers in Canada. For example, during my final practicum, 31 of my 54 students were identified as being ELL. I was curious how many ELL students there were in Ontario, so as a change I made from my original proposal, I actually looked up some facts so my teacher candidates know why this is such an important topic. In Ontario, roughly 25% of students are English language learners. But in 23% of schools, there's no specialized ELL support teacher for these students. That means it is especially important for teachers to know the best strategies for helping these students so they can achieve to the best of their abilities. We must accommodate our teaching strategies to make sure every student in our classroom is following our lessons, not just the ones raised in a family that speaks English as their first and primary language. Unfortunately, too many ELL students fall behind because they struggle to follow the lessons. ELLs actually have a higher risk of dropping out of school because of low academic achievement. It is the duty of the teacher to make sure they do everything in their power to include every student in the learning process, a task that may sometimes seem difficult and overwhelming. It is my hope to shed some light on the strategies that teachers can employ to use in their classroom to help these students succeed. This brings me to my research question. As a general question, it is more applicable to teachers in their class. How can teachers help English language learners succeed in the classroom? More specifically, to pertain to my current class, how can I help my grade 5 ELL students succeed to the best of their abilities during my practicum? I feel it is important to be very specific with this question because strategies that may work for one ELL student may not work for others. All strategies should be tailored to the individual student and not generalized. There are several key words that are important to know for my action research project. First is the acronym ELL, which stands for English Language Learner. This refers to a student whose first language is not English. This term has replaced the commonly known acronym ESL, which stood for English as a Second Language, and it was replaced because English might not actually be their second language. It might be their third or fourth or more. Another term that is important to know is inquiry-based learning, or IBL, which is a new teaching pedagogy in which the learning is more student-led rather than teacher-led. It places students' inquiries and questions at the center of learning and gives them the freedom to explore and learn on their own terms. And it can be done with varying amounts of teacher involvement. And this brings me to my review of some of the literature that is currently out there regarding what teachers can do to help ELL students. The article by Dr. Pang focused on how to empower ELL students in order for them to improve writing skills by using inquiry-based learning. She suggested using visuals to facilitate English vocabulary and increase understanding of the concepts being taught. In other words, visuals should be used in all subjects, not just when explicitly teaching English. Dr. Pang also cautions teachers not to use watered-down content, as this is not beneficial to any of the learners in the classroom. Instead, teachers should break everything down into small steps, a strategy shown to be beneficial to everyone. Teachers should also utilize cooperative learning and peer tutoring to help ELL students, and this is especially effective when they are paired with another student that speaks their native language. She also suggested that inquiry-based learning in any subject can help develop better English language proficiency. An article by Dr. Liu and Dr. Wang looked at reading development for ELL students and specifically focused on cooperative versus independent reading. They found that cooperative reading activities such as small group work and pair work were not actually as effective, which is contrary to what was assumed. It was found that independent reading with the student's own choice of material was actually the most beneficial. They found that the most significant improvement was when small group work or pair work was used only once or twice a month for reading. Any more or any less showed to actually be detrimental to ELL students. However, it still remains that the most significant factor for ELL reading performance was the amount of independent reading they did. In the article by Dr. Coates, it discussed strategies teachers should use in the classroom, as well as the knowledge that teachers should have prior to teaching ELL students. First, it is important that teachers recognize that their past experiences and their backgrounds that they come from influence their perceptions, and they need to be very wary of the biases that they might have. Teachers need to also educate themselves on students' cultures and some unique challenges that each student might have. It also noted that nonverbal visual cues and graphic organizers strengthen ELL's understanding of the relationship between language and concepts. She also suggested the use of a picture dictionary in the classroom, which is available to all students, containing key terms and pictures that they have covered in class. This article focused on the importance of educators being able to differentiate between linguistic and instructional accommodations. Instructional accommodation refers to how content is taught, made accessible, and assessed. On the other hand, linguistic accommodation refers to how accommodations are used, such as simplifying English to introduce content, directions read aloud and visually seen, and rephrasing. Teachers should be using both types of accommodation in their classroom in order to help ELL students. In this book, the authors give a very detailed account of many strategies teachers can use in the classroom, and I'd highly suggest everyone reading it. Similar to other sources, the authors discussed how non-linguistic cues are important. However, they did add that it's important that visuals need to be given in conjunction with linguistic instruction. They also suggest teachers regularly check for student understanding, for example, by using the thumbs up, down, or sideways method as a way for students to show how much of the concepts they are understanding. It is also vital that teachers create a positive classroom environment built on healthy and trusting student-to-student as well as student-to-teacher relationships. This allows all students to feel comfortable taking risks and trying new things, for example, speaking in English. While these strategies are important to utilize, it is also equally important that teachers are aware of some of the common misconceptions that go along with teaching ELL students. This article focused on 4 main ones. The first misconception is that learning English as an additional language simply requires exposure and interaction in that language. Learning English as an additional language requires much more than simple exposure. The second misconception is that all ELLs will learn English in the same way and at the same rate. All learners are different, and as teachers, we need to know what works best for each of our individual students. The third misconception is that what is considered good teaching for native English speakers is good teaching for ELL students. ELL students need different accommodations than other students, the complexities of which are described further in their article. The fourth misconception is that effective instruction means nonverbal support. What is meant by this is that as educators, it is not beneficial for us to allow ELLs to avoid the language demands of school. It is beneficial for us to use these nonverbal accommodations, but should only be used with other techniques as well to help ELL students. Now that I have gone over some of the literature covering strategies teachers can use, I will now go over my actual research plan. There are a lot of suggestions given, and I want to find out what strategies work best for my specific students. I have chosen 3 different data sources in order to get the most reliable and valid data. First, I will take anecdotal notes, which are observations that take note of how each of the ELL students react to certain strategies and what seems to be working or not working. I chose this data source because it is less structured, which means I can add any notes I think are important at any time. This data collection is also going to happen quite often compared to the other sources, with notes being taken at least once a week. The second source that I will be looking at is past and current records. This refers to previous year's report cards and progress reports, as well as any other notes in the OSR. I will also be collecting current assessments every 4 weeks. I chose this source because I will be able to track and note any and all progress that occurs, so I know which strategies are working for each student. This also allows me to look at all subjects, not just language. ELLs can struggle in any subject, not just the one that explicitly teaches English, since, the entire school day is taught in English. The third data source will be students' journals, which they write in approximately once a week. I chose this specific data source for a couple of reasons. First, students may divulge personal feelings about certain strategies that I'm using, or may discuss if or how their feelings have changed towards school. I will also be able to look explicitly at their writing skills and how they're developing. I will be collecting the journals every 3 months, so any progress will be more clear. All sources of data will be collected throughout the entire school year, September until June, because it may take a while to see results, and this will occur in the classroom. The notes regarding past student records will happen in the room with the OSRs. As for who will be involved, the students and the teacher are directly involved in data collection. The principal will also be involved in that she will need to know that this research is being conducted, and she might also be interested in the results. For my research, some sources of data might not have worked as well as the ones that I've chosen. For example, doing a survey would not give me enough depth of information and would not give me enough data to draw any conclusions. I did not choose to do interviews as it would be impractical for my research since it does not show the kind of information that I am looking for. The reason why I chose these specific data sources is because it allows me to triangulate my results, making the research more reliable and valid. I chose both qualitative and quantitative data, so I would be more likely to see any results that occur. By having data collected throughout different intervals in the school year and having frequent data collection, it means that the results are more likely to be valid and reliable. I'm also increasing the validity because I'm collecting data from all subject areas, not just language classes. Whenever working with a vulnerable group of people, such as children, we need to be extra cautious of ethical considerations. I therefore need to ensure that all data is anonymous and confidential. I will be doing so by using pseudonyms for the students involved, as well as keeping the data locked at all times. I will also ensure that I am never acting, consciously or subconsciously, in a way that could be seen as biased. All participants will be treated equitably, and I will consciously be aware of this. Before conducting my research, I would also make sure that both students and their parents, since the students are minors, sign consent forms if they want to be involved in the research. I will also make sure that both parents and students know that they can withdraw from the data collection at any point in time. This topic is extremely important for all teachers to be aware of, since we have so many ELL students in Canada. It is our responsibility as teachers to make sure that our students are learning to the best of their abilities, and this includes students whose first language is not English. ELL students can struggle in the classroom, so we need to make sure we have a variety of techniques and strategies to help them. We also need to keep in mind that they are individuals, which means you need to get to know each and every student and what works for them specifically. Thank you for listening to my presentation on my action research plan on how to help ELL students in the classroom. Hope you've enjoyed.